Hey everyone! So I'm super excited about this new tool in Capture One Pro 12. I use Luminosity Masks a lot in Photoshop, so I'm really eager to see how this compares. The image on the left is without any adjustments, and on the right is after I've applied some Luminosity Masks with color grading and sharpening and contrast. So let's get started. So first I'm going to come up to the Layers panel here, and I'm going to add a new filled layer. Now all that means is you don't have to start painting with a brush, the layer is already filled. So if I press my keyboard shortcut M, you can see the mask is already on the image. I'm going to rename this layer Shadows because I'm going to work in that area first. And then I'll go up to my Luma Range tool here. So this will bring up a window. Now, one thing to make clear is that Capture One is not actually creating masks, but it's adding constraints to a mask that will target certain areas in your image. So here we have our range adjusters. On the left side, we have the darker areas in our image, and on the right side, we have the brighter areas. So if I take a control point, if I take this white control point and move it to the left, the mask will now be constrained to the darker areas in our image. I can also feather the mask by choosing this control point and pulling outwards. So you can see how the mask starts to get softer and more feathered there. And the closer I bring this, the harder the edge. You can also reset this control point by double clicking. So we're back to the original position. So now if I choose the dark control point and move to the right, the mask will be constrained to the brighter areas. You can also move the whole selection by choosing the middle and dragging. Okay, so let's reset everything so we're back to the original position. So because I want to work in the shadow areas, I'm going to select the white control point and start moving it to the left. I also am going to move this endpoint across. You can see over her hair, the mask just isn't selecting those areas because it's so dark there. So let's move this across to make sure we capture those. So I want this luminosity mask to not only catch the shadow areas, but maybe even some of the freckles, because that is something that using the brush tool would have been near impossible. That's the beauty of the luminosity masks. You can really get into the detailed areas. So let's play with the feathering. So somewhere around there, I think, is a good selection. Now down here you have radius and sensitivity, and this is a way to improve the quality of your mask. So radius changes the impact of sensitivity, and sensitivity lets you decide whether you want the mask to follow the edges more closely or ignore them. So, every image is different, so just play with these sliders and see what works for the image. So I think somewhere around there. So the mask is still very natural, and I think that's going to work well. So I'll press apply, and I'm going to press M to get rid of that mask view. Now we have the luminosity mask. What can we do with it? Well, any panel that has this brush icon next to it means whatever adjustments I make, they're only going to be applied to the layer. So I want to affect the luminosity of this layer. So I'll go down to my curves, and I'll add a control point and just pull downwards to darken everything. So you can see how that adds a bit more contrast. I also want my blacks to be blacker, so I'm going to bring this endpoint to the right. If you're unsure how to use curves, I have another tutorial on YouTube all about luminosity masks in Photoshop, and the concepts of curves is exactly the same, so make sure to check that out. Now I'm just trying to color grade this layer a little bit. I'm going to add a control point and just tweak to see what I prefer. And maybe now in the blue channel, I'm just going to cool the shadows a little bit. So experiment and see what works for your image. So now I can come back up to the layers panel and I can toggle this layer on and off. So let's see the before and the after. And I can also reduce the opacity if I want to lessen the effect. So maybe just somewhere around there works well. Okay, so now I'm going to add another layer because this time I want to affect the brighter areas of my image. So I'll call this brights. And let's click on the Luma Range button again. And we can also display mask here. Okay, so now I want to only target the brighter areas. I'm going to take the darker control point and move this across. I'll again move this end point to the very right. And I'm just trying to select the bright areas on her skin, just where the light was hitting. So let's see, somewhere around there. And now let's tweak the feathering so it's nice and natural. Maybe somewhere around there. So I'm going to play with the radius and the sensitivity as well. So let's just increase that. And maybe just a tiny bit. Okay, so I'm going to press apply. And now let's go back down to the curves and I'm going to affect the brightness of this layer. So I just want to give it a bit more of a pop. So I'm going to bring this upwards. So you can kind of see how it's adding more depth to the image and more contrast as well. So maybe somewhere around there. I think I'll play with the color now. Maybe just cool down these highlight areas. Maybe just a tiny bit. Somewhere around there. And I'm going to take down that opacity as well. So it's nice and subtle. So let's see, let's go maybe somewhere around there. And let's toggle that on and off. Okay, so lastly, I'd like to add some targeted sharpening just to her eyes and eyelashes to give them a bit more definition. So let's zoom in. I'll press Z on my keyboard so we can see a bit better. And I'll add a new filled layer. I'll call this Sharpen. And now select the Luma Range button. Let's display the mask so we can see what we're doing. And we want to target the darker areas. So I'll bring over the white control point. And I'll also just knock this to the very edge so we're getting as much of the black as possible. And I'm just going to play with the slider until I'm happy I've got enough of her eyelashes and eye area chosen. And look how quick that was to target such a fine and detailed area on my image. And this is why these luminosity masks give you so much more control. Now let's go up to the sharpening panel and I'll just increase that amount. I'll go crazy so you guys can see exactly where that is going. Okay, and I always know I can take down the opacity of that layer. So let's go back to the layers panel and we can hide that layer to see the before and now the after. And we can also bring down the opacity. So now let's press M to see where that mask is affecting our image. So I'm going to hold down Option and zoom out. Now I'll just erase any areas I don't want sharpened, and I can be really haphazard because the mask is being constrained only to those darker areas. Now we have our luminosity masks created. A really cool thing we can do is to copy over those layers onto any other images in our series, and those masks will be automatically created for the new images. So let me show you. I'm going to hold down Command and select another image, and you can choose as many images as you want. I'll come back up to the layers panel, and here we have the copy adjustments icon. So I'm going to hold down Shift and select this button. And now all of those layers will be pasted onto this new image. The only tweaks I'll need to make are to the Sharpen mask. So let's press M to view that. And because I erased parts on this image, those will also be pasted onto this new image. So I'll need to clean up that mask by pressing E and just getting my eraser tool and removing any areas I don't want sharpened. Likewise, I can press B to get my brush tool and just brush over any dark areas that I want the sharpening to be added to. Okay, so hopefully this shows you the power of the new Luminosity Masks tool in Capture One 12. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. And if you liked the tutorial, please share it and make sure to subscribe so you're the first to know about new retouching videos. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks so much for watching.